So let's consider the working day as a generalized example of production. Labor is engaged for wages to produce an X number of products within a given time. Let us assume that the number of products depends on the number of hours worked. The longer the working day is, the more products get finished and can be shipped to markets to be sold. First, we factor in the socially necessary compensation in wages for the worker to survive and be able to work again the next day. This is, in other words, the bare minimum of social reproduction of labor. You can see this visualized here in this graph, where in an 8-hour working day, 4 hours make the bare minimum of the wages. So if we assume that 4 hours is the minimum, but the working day is typically 8 hours, we can visualize this difference with a bar, with the necessary labor time marked at halfway down the bar. So labor is engaged for wages to produce X number of products within a given time. If the wages equaled the market price of the product, there would be no profit left for the capitalist. So if the product takes 6 hours to make, then the remaining 2 hours is surplus value extracted from the laborer. Here, the length of the working day becomes an issue. If the working day can be extended through force or legislation to 10 hours, for example, the proportion of surplus value, i.e. profit, extends to 4 hours. Historically speaking, the more political bargaining power the capitalists have in relation to the workers, the longer the working day is. If the working day cannot be lengthened, then its efficiency must be increased through technological advancement. The development of mechanization has the tendency of becoming absorbed into relative surplus value. In other words, the benefits of mechanization or automation do not effectively reduce the labor time, but merely increase the output. Here I recommend Aaron Benanav's book Automation and the Future of Work if you want a more modern approach. Now let us further assume that the new advances in productivity mean that as many products can be made in 5 hours as previously in 6. But as the length of the working day and the wages remain the same, surplus value and the de facto rate of exploitation of labor increases further. This pattern assumes that previously accumulated surplus value finances the technological advances, but also acknowledges how automation and machinery serve an important purpose in the framework of Marxist political economy. Indeed, originally it was assumed that as efficiency in production increases, people would have to work less but receive sufficient wages for meeting their immediate needs. This has not happened. Efficiency of work is used to leverage more profits by reducing labor costs, in other words, reducing staff. Platform work and other innovations making it increasingly harder to determine where the line between necessary and surplus labor is drawn. However, we have seen some clear signs of how productivity is separating from worker compensation, meaning wages. Here you can see a chart from the Economic Policy Institute in the United States showing how productivity rate per hour continues to climb, but hourly compensation for workers has leveled off. The struggle for the working day has been marked by this antagonism of the laborer who would like to work only as much as he is paid, and the capitalist who would like to engage labor for as long as he can for a fixed wage to increase profits. When people are socially compelled to work longer hours, the outcome is negative in terms of health effects and other associated costs, as we have seen, for example, in Japan, where there is a specific term coined for death through overwork. Liberal or classical economics tend to assume the length of the working day is determined by the preferences of the workers trading leisure for higher income, but Marxist political economy emphasizes the role of class power in determining the normal working hours, which are often realized in legislation. Current laws on working day length have been determined through collective class struggle by the labor movement, much like Marx suggested it would have to be. Here is a quotation from Volume 1 of Capital, Chapter 10, on the working day, that is directly relevant to this. Quote, "The capitalist maintains his rights as the purchaser when he tries to make the working day as long as possible and to make, whenever possible, 2 working days out of 1. On the other hand, the peculiar nature of the commodity sold implies a limit to its consumption by the purchaser, and the laborer maintains his right as seller when he wishes to reduce the working day to one of definite normal duration. There is here, therefore, an antinomy, right against right, both equally bearing the seal of law of exchanges. Between equal rights, force decides. Hence, it is in the history of capitalist production the determination of what is a working day presents itself as a result of a struggle between collective capital, i.e. the class of capitalists, and collective labor, i.e. the working class. The law of competition I mentioned earlier within capitalism means that those capitalists that are willing to exploit their workers the most can bring products to the market at the lowest cost. According to Marx, this simple law will defeat all attempts of being fair. Companies that pay the labor force more than the absolute minimum will have to offer higher prices, which will reduce profitability. Arguably, this also applies to corporate social responsibility or environmental responsibility. This mechanism is discussed in Capital Volume 1 through the example of child labor as low-cost labor. Child labor was seen as giving an unfair competitive edge to some industries and not others. Therefore, capitalists agreed that the use of child labor should be outlawed by the reasons of profit accumulation rather than any moral ones.
So basically, the banning of child labor was to benefit the capitalists on a larger scale.
Or make the playing field more level. Like a few capitalists were able to use child labor laws, the other capitalists in different industries or adjacent industries were saying that this is unfair, that why can they use it and we can't.
Okay.
So then it was outlawed altogether. Low wage levels lead to, for example, taking on additional jobs or working overtime as a matter of course to make ends meet. Even in wealthy nations with the introduction of the so-called gig economy. This is seen in the precarious academic labor market in the US and UK as well. Marxist theory is arguably also applicable to small-scale entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs have theoretical control over their working hours and conditions, but in practice this is rare, because subcontracting chains tend to move the highest rate of exploitation down the chain to small entrepreneurs. There are problems with Marxist theory, the most notable being an assumption of a relatively homogeneous work and working force. The theory should be applied to the entire economy as a whole, rather than comparing specific industries or individual cases.